Have you ever felt that the more you understand the world, the lonelier you become? That the deeper your thoughts go, the more silence you face? It's not just your imagination. This feeling has echoed through the minds of some of the greatest thinkers in history. Because the truth is, society doesn't fear ignorance, it fears awareness. And those who see too much, who understand too deeply, often find themselves standing alone. This is the curse of insight. Not because it's wrong, but because it arrives too early. The deep thinker becomes the outsider, not due to lack of truth, but because their truth is too uncomfortable, too inconvenient. They don't just present ideas, they expose blind spots. They don't shout, they reflect. And that reflection can be unbearable for those not ready to confront it. Socrates was condemned not because he lied, but because he made people think. His questions were sharper than swords. He didn't lead revolts, he led conversations. But it was enough to get him killed. Tesla imagined a world powered by free energy. He didn't fail because he lacked brilliance, but because he dared to challenge systems built on control. Throughout history, intelligence has rarely been welcomed. Not in its raw form, not when it threatens comfort. People crave familiarity, not disruption. Deep thinkers don't just uncover truth, they uncover the lies we live with. And so, instead of applause, they're met with silence, suspicion, or even punishment. This is the paradox of insight. The more you see, the less you are seen. The clearer your vision, the more blurred your connection with the world becomes. Not because you are broken, but because you are awake in a world that sleeps with its eyes open. When you meet someone physically stronger than you might feel inspired or even protected. Their strength is something you can see, admire, and measure. It doesn't question your identity, it simply exists alongside yours. The same applies to wealth. A rich person might spark envy, but they don't necessarily threaten your sense of self. Their success seems external, distant, and often aspirational. You may wish you had what they have, but you rarely feel attacked by their existence. But when someone is intellectually superior, when their words reveal thoughts you've never considered, or their silence feels more profound than noise, something strange happens. You don't just see them as different. You start to feel small, unsure, even defensive. Their presence feels like a mirror, one that reflects not just who they are, but who you are not. And that reflection is uncomfortable. This is the mirror effect. Deep thinkers don't need to insult, argue, or challenge. They just need to exist. Their very presence holds up a mirror to the room, exposing superficiality, contradictions, and limitations. And most people don't want to see that. It's easier to break the mirror than face the image staring back. Unlike strength or wealth, intelligence threatens identity. It's not external, it's internal. It's not something you own. It's something you are. So when someone smarter enters a space, the insecure don't just see a difference in knowledge. They feel their entire worldview wobble. Their assumptions feel questioned. Their confidence feels exposed. And the natural response is rejection. Not open disagreement, but subtle distance, eye rolls, changed topics, mockery, avoidance. Because it's safer to dismiss the deep thinker than to wrestle with the discomfort they create. It's easier to label them arrogant, boring, or too serious than to admit they've touched something real. This is why society often celebrates strength, wealth, beauty, even talent, but hesitates to celebrate intelligence. Because intelligence doesn't just shine, it reveals. And revelation is risky. It asks for change, for rethinking, for letting go of comfortable illusions. Most people aren't ready for that. So the deep thinker becomes the outsider. Not because they are wrong, but because they make others feel wrong. Not because they try to hurt, but because their very being feels like a wound to the insecure. They don't just see more. They make others see less, and that is something society rarely forgives. Intelligence is not just a skill, it's a part of who we are. It's deeply tied to our identity, to the way we make sense of the world and our place in it. Our thoughts, beliefs, and understanding become the foundation of our ego. We build our self-image around what we know, what we believe, and how we perceive things. That's why, when we encounter someone who seems to see further, think deeper, or question more intelligently, it doesn't feel like a friendly comparison. It feels like a threat. Unlike wealth or beauty, intelligence operates internally. You can wear nice clothes or go to the gym, but your thoughts are personal. They are your lens on life. So when someone challenges that lens, not through argument, but by simply seeing more clearly, it can shake you. It doesn't just make you feel less smart. It makes you feel less you. This is where the ego steps in. The ego is not evil, it's a defense mechanism. Its job is to protect your sense of self. When it senses a threat to your mental structure, it doesn't invite the threat in for tea. It puts up walls. It denies. It mocks. It avoids. Because facing someone else's mental superiority means possibly confronting the idea that your worldview might be limited, even flawed. And that is deeply unsettling. Most people don't consciously think, "I'm afraid of this person's intelligence." Instead, they feel discomfort and label it something else. They say the thinker is arrogant, antisocial, too intense, or not fun. But beneath all these excuses is often a bruised ego trying to protect itself from collapse. This is why people resist thinkers rather than embrace them. It's not about disagreement, it's about identity protection. The deeper someone thinks, the more they challenge assumptions. And assumptions are the glue holding most identities together. Challenging them feels like pulling at the seams of a carefully stitched self-dot. So instead of learning from the thinker, most people turn away. They surround themselves with opinions that echo their own. They avoid conversations that go too deep. They cling to simplicity, not because it's better, but because it's safer. For the deep thinker, this creates a lonely path. Not because they isolate themselves, but because their presence triggers unseen insecurities. Their intelligence becomes a quiet rebellion against collective ego. And in a world built on fitting in, that quiet rebellion makes them feel like they don't belong. But the discomfort others feel is not the thinker's fault. It's a byproduct of awareness in a world designed for ease. And that awareness, no matter how isolating, remains a rare and powerful form of truth. For most of human history, survival depended not on being the smartest person in the group, but on being accepted by the group. Our ancestors lived in tightly bonded tribes where safety came from unity, not individual brilliance. Fitting in was not just social, it was a matter of life and death. If the tribe rejected you, your chances of survival plummeted. This is the environment our brains were built for, and those survival instincts still shape our behavior today. That our brains didn't evolve to seek truth. They evolved to detect threats, preserve group harmony, and maintain social cohesion. So, when a deep thinker steps into a conversation and begins to challenge accepted norms or question comforting beliefs, the reaction isn't logical, it's biological. The primal brain sounds an internal alarm. This person is dangerous, not physically but socially. They might disrupt the balance, they might cause division. And that is perceived, on a deep, unconscious level, as a threat. This explains why deep thinkers often feel resistance in group settings. Their ideas, no matter how well-intentioned or insightful, activate ancient survival circuits in others. The amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for detecting danger, becomes active, just as it would when facing a predator. Except here, the danger isn't teeth or claws. It's truth, complexity, change. A 2021 study from Stanford revealed something fascinating. People felt less threatened by intelligent individuals when interacting one-on-one. But in group settings, that same intelligence triggered defensiveness, anxiety, and even subtle hostility. The reason? In groups, social comparison becomes more intense. People worry not just about what's true, but about how they appear. If someone seems intellectually superior, others feel diminished, especially when others are watching. So instead of valuing the deep thinker, the group instinctively isolates them. Sometimes subtly through awkward silences or changed subjects. Sometimes aggressively through mockery or exclusion. Either way, the outcome is the same. The thinker is cast out, not because they are wrong, but because their presence threatens the emotional safety of the tribe. This is the evolutionary irony of intelligence. The very trait that advances civilization often clashes with the instincts that keep society together. And unless people are aware of these instincts, they will keep choosing comfort over clarity and cohesion over truth, rejecting the deep thinker to preserve the illusion of harmony. Human beings are not as rational as we like to believe. Our brains rely on mental shortcuts called cognitive biases, automatic patterns of thinking that help us make sense of the world quickly, but not always accurately. These shortcuts evolved to protect us from danger and confusion, but in the modern world, they often serve a different purpose, protecting our ego. And when it comes to intelligence, especially ideas that challenge our beliefs, these biases act like invisible shields that block the truth before it even enters. One of the most powerful examples is the Dunning-Kruger effect. This bias causes people with low ability to overestimate their competence. In simple terms, those who know the least often think they know the most. Meanwhile, truly intelligent individuals tend to doubt themselves because they're more aware of what they don't know. This mismatch creates conflict. When a deep thinker presents a nuanced idea, the less informed person may feel threatened and respond with arrogance. Instead of humility, they mock or dismiss what they don't understand, assuming they know better simply because they lack the awareness to realize they don't. Then there's the status quo bias. This is the brain's preference for familiar ideas over new, complex truths. We feel safer with what we already believe, even if it's flawed. Deep thinkers disrupt that safety by introducing unfamiliar concepts. Their insights force people to question deeply held assumptions, and that creates anxiety. So instead of welcoming the challenge, most people cling to the old belief simply because it feels more comfortable. Intelligence becomes the enemy, not because it's wrong, but because it's new. Finally, the backfire effect. This occurs when people are presented with evidence that contradicts their beliefs. Instead of reconsidering, they dig in even deeper. The brain treats the challenge as a threat, and the ego responds by doubling down. The deep thinker doesn't just fail to convince, they unintentionally strengthen the very belief they were trying to dismantle. Logic doesn't win. Emotion does. These biases are not rare. They shape everyday interactions, especially in debates or discussions where truth meets resistance. They explain why people mock thinkers, dismiss experts, and attack anyone who makes them feel intellectually uncomfortable. It's not about reason, it's about defense. And until these biases are understood, deep thinkers will continue to be misunderstood. In the digital age, visibility doesn't depend on wisdom, it depends on engagement. The content that spreads the fastest isn't the most thoughtful or insightful. It's the most emotionally charged. Outrage, humor, controversy, these drive clicks, likes, and shares. And that means the algorithm, the invisible hand shaping what billions of people see every day, doesn't reward depth. It rewards reaction. For deep thinkers, this creates a painful paradox. Their ideas are layered, nuanced, and often uncomfortable. They deal in complexity, not slogans. But the internet doesn't wait for complexity. If you can't deliver your message in a few seconds, it gets buried. Not because it lacks value, but because it lacks virality. The platforms we rely on, social media, video apps, news feeds, are built to keep people scrolling. They prioritize content that triggers instinct, not intellect. Anger spreads faster than reason. Simplicity beats subtlety. Tribal loyalty wins over independent thought. In this landscape, the deep thinker isn't just ignored, they're invisible. Even worse, when they do try to engage, they're often misunderstood. A complex idea gets reduced, taken out of context, or distorted for clicks. People skim past the point, cherry-pick a sentence, and respond with outrage. The thinker, trying to spark reflection, instead finds themselves sparking backlash. And so many intellectual voices go quiet. Not because they have nothing to say, but because there's no space for them to be heard. Or worse, they feel forced to water down their thoughts to make them palatable, clickable, marketable. But depth diluted is depth destroyed. The algorithm doesn't hate intelligence. It just can't recognize it. It sees numbers, not meaning. It promotes whatever keeps people emotionally reactive and mentally distracted. And that means the deeper the thinker, the more uphill their climb. In a world designed to reward noise, silence becomes the price of insight. Arthur Schopenhauer saw intelligence not as a gift, but as a burden. To him, the pursuit of truth wasn't a noble adventure. It was a path into isolation, discomfort, and suffering. While most people move through life guided by desire-seeking comfort, pleasure, and validation, deep thinkers are driven by something entirely different: the will to truth. And that difference, he believed, explains why intelligence often leads to loneliness. Schopenhauer described the will to live as the force that drives most human behavior. It's the instinct to survive, to seek gratification, to avoid pain. It's what fuels ambition, relationships, entertainment, and all the distractions people use to stay comfortable. Most of society orbits around this will-chasing goals that promise happiness, even if those goals are illusions. But deep thinkers operate differently. Instead of blindly following the will to live, they develop the will to truth, an inner compulsion to understand reality, no matter how bleak or unsettling it may be. They don't just want to live, they want to know. And that quest often peels back the layers of illusion that most people cling to. It exposes the emptiness behind ambition, the shallow nature of social norms, the chaos beneath the surface of order. This pursuit isolates them. Because when you stop chasing what excites the majority, you stop connecting with them. You see through what others worship. You question what others accept. And in doing so, you create distance, not out of arrogance, but out of clarity. Schopenhauer believed that the more a person understood human nature, the harder it became to relate to others. Not because the thinker changes, but because their vision sharpens. They notice the falseness in everyday conversation, the repetition in people's desires, the artificiality in modern life. And the more they see, the less they can pretend to. Seek truth above all else is to willingly step outside the tribe. It is to exchange comfort for clarity. That, Schopenhauer warned, is the price of intelligence. It grants awareness but takes away belonging. History doesn't just repeat itself, it forgets who it punished along the way. The rejection of deep thinkers is not a glitch in modern society. It is a pattern as old as thought itself. Again and again, those who saw more clearly were cast aside, not because they were wrong, but because they were too far ahead. Society demands comfort, and the truth rarely offers it. The result is always the same. Those who challenge the illusions of their time are dismissed, persecuted, or destroyed, only to be praised by later generations once their ideas feel safe. Socrates spent his life asking questions that made people uncomfortable. He didn't start revolutions or write manifestos. He simply invited people to think critically, but that was enough. The Athenian state sentenced him to death for corrupting the youth and disrespecting the gods. In truth, his only crime was encouraging people to question authority. His final words, "The unexamined life is not worth living," still echo, but in his time, they were a death sentence. Galileo looked through a telescope and saw the truth that the earth revolved around the sun. But this truth shattered centuries of religious teaching. The church, unwilling to lose control, labeled him a heretic and placed him under house arrest for the rest of his life. His discoveries were undeniable, but they were denied anyway, because admitting them would mean admitting the institution was wrong. Friedrich Nietzsche tore apart traditional morality and exposed the comforting lies people tell themselves. He warned of the dangers of blind belief, nationalism, and herd thinking. His ideas were so radical that people dismissed him as mad. He died in silence, his mind broken, his work misunderstood. Only years later did the world begin to recognize the depth of his philosophy. Nikola Tesla dreamed of a world powered by free energy, wireless communication, and infinite possibility. But his vision threatened the profits of powerful industrialists. Instead of being funded, he was sabotaged. He died alone in a hotel room, penniless, while others built empires on his stolen inventions. Alan Turing cracked the Nazi code and helped end World War II. His ideas formed the foundation of modern computing. But because he was gay, he was chemically castrated by the very government he helped save. He died by suicide, decades before the world acknowledged his genius. Hypatia of Alexandria was a brilliant mathematician, philosopher, and astronomer in a male-dominated world. Her commitment to reason and science made her a target. In 415 AD, a mob of religious extremists dragged her from her chariot and murdered her in the street. Her legacy was erased for centuries. All of them were right, just too soon. And their stories are not ancient relics, they are warnings. Society does not embrace truth in real time. It punishes those who bring it. Only when the cost of change has passed does it dare to remember them. From the moment we enter the education system, we're taught to follow, not question. Schools claim to value intelligence, but what they actually reward is obedience. The students who memorize, comply, and repeat are praised. The ones who challenge, explore, or question authority are often labeled as troublemakers. Independent thought is rarely encouraged because it disrupts the system. Insightful minds are squeezed into standard molds, and anything that doesn't fit is pushed aside. This pattern doesn't stop after graduation. In the workplace, brilliance takes a backseat to cultural fit. Companies say they want innovation, but what they really want is predictability. The employee who questions procedures or suggests a new way of thinking is often seen as a threat. Meetings aren't designed for truth, they're designed for agreement. Those who raise uncomfortable questions are quietly sidelined. The system favors those who keep the machine running, not those who try to rewire it. Politics is no different. Leaders who speak hard truths lose elections. Those who offer comforting narratives, even if they're false, are rewarded with power. Complexity doesn't win votes, simplicity does. The politician who dares to challenge. The majority is branded extreme, out of touch, or dangerous. Truth rarely survives the campaign trail. It's filtered, softened, or ignored in favor of what makes people feel safe. These institutions, schools, workplaces, governments aren't built to nurture visionaries. They're built to preserve norms. They survive by maintaining order, not by embracing disruption. And so, deep thinkers must often choose between honesty and acceptance. Most choose silence, not because they lack insight, but because they know the system isn't ready for it. If you've ever felt out of place for thinking deeply, know this: you are not broken. You are simply awake in a world that prefers sleep. Your isolation is not a flaw. It is the natural cost of seeing things others don't. Clarity, by its nature, separates. But that separation does not mean you are alone in spirit. In solitude, there is space for thought to breathe. In silence, wisdom grows. You don't need the approval of the crowd to validate your insight. You only need the quiet confidence of knowing what you see is real. Seek out those who understand, not many, but a few. True connection is rare, but it is always worth the wait. Protect your Depth, speak only when it serves truth. Observe, learn, create. Let your mind be your sanctuary, not your prison. Intelligence may isolate, but it also liberates. And in that freedom, there is strength. As Schopenhauer said, talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can. See, if you see what others don't curse your vision. Honor it.